Over the past 70 years, the relationship between China and North Korea has been shaped by mutual strategic interests on political, economic, and especially ideological levels, with both countries actively opposing the United States' global leadership. From the Chinese perspective, support for North Korea has been crucial in distancing American influence from its border, serving as a buffer state between China and the US military presence in South Korea, thereby preserving its national security. However, the relationship between North Koreans and Chinese appears to be weakening, as China has spent decades strengthening its image as a responsible and predictable global leader, while North Korea has been pushing for a more aggressive stance, engaging in provocative and isolationist actions, including constant threats against its neighbors and nuclear weapons development. In this scenario, China has begun reconsidering its position on North Korea, as the country increasingly poses a threat to regional stability in East Asia. And in this video, we will understand why China will abandon North Korea and how the relationship between the two countries is deteriorating. In this context, to understand how China will abandon North Korea, it is necessary to understand the complex relationship between the two countries, whose origins date back to the Korean Peninsula conflict, which began with the division of the region along the 38th parallel, as Japan was defeated in World War II. After the division, North Korea was occupied by the Soviet Union, while the South was occupied by the United States, with both sides becoming targets of the power struggle, influence, and ideological dominance of the superpowers during the Cold War. While the South developed based on a capitalist model supported by the United States, the communist regime prevailed in the North, backed by both the Soviet Union and China. It did not take long for Korea to become a reflection of post-World War II Germany's division, but with a different perspective, as both governments considered themselves the only legitimate rulers of the entire peninsula, which in a way left little room for negotiations. Keeping this in mind, the rivalry between the two sides was so intense that it led to an armed conflict in 1950 when North Korea invaded the South with the support of the Soviet Union and later China, triggering the Korean War with retaliation from the Republican forces backed by the United States and the UN. Although a ceasefire was reached in 1953 through an armistice agreement, the conflict between the two Koreas was never formally ended with a definitive peace treaty, keeping both countries in a Cold War that has lasted for more than 70 years. As a consequence of the agreement, the Korean Demilitarized Zone was established, a 248-kilometer strip of land that crosses the Korean peninsula along the 38th parallel, serving as a buffer zone. At the time, the conflict on the Korean peninsula was crucial in bringing China and North Korea closer together, strengthening the political and ideological ties between the two countries. The fear that American forces might conquer North Korea forced China to mobilize for the battlefield, leading to the creation of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, as maintaining North Korean territory was considered part of China's national security. North Korea serves as the gateway to Manchuria in northeast China, a historically contested region rich in resources such as coal. This was one of the main reasons behind Japan's invasion and occupation of the region, which lasted from 1931 to 1945. Given this, it is not surprising that China mobilized hundreds of thousands of soldiers during the conflict and became deeply involved with North Korea, assuming the role of protector of the North Korean regime in the following decades. China even considered its neighbor a strategic asset, as North Korea is the only nation in the world to have China as a military ally through an official treaty, the Sino-North Korean Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, signed in 1961. This treaty established strict military assistance criteria between the two countries, stipulating that if one member were attacked, the other would provide immediate military assistance. This measure aims to deter major external threats that could intervene in the Korean peninsula and destabilize the North Korean regime. Moreover, it is worth noting that the treaty extends beyond the military and defensive aspects, as it also includes a commitment to economic and cultural cooperation, including Chinese assistance to North Korea. This collaboration was crucial for maintaining the North Korean government, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union and North Korea's increasingly isolationist stance. Nonetheless, this behavior brought negative consequences, leading to structural political and especially economic problems due to the preservation of the dictatorship and human rights violations. These issues resulted in sanctions and embargoes imposed by both the UN and the United States, which intensified when North Korea's nuclear program was revealed in the late 20th century. These factors became catalysts for North Korea's economic stagnation over the past 7 decades, leaving it far behind its southern neighbor. In the 1950s, the North was economically more advanced than the South, but it fell behind due to isolation and a centralized economy. Today, while North Korea's GDP is estimated at $30 billion, South Korea's GDP exceeds $1.7 trillion. The North Korean economy survives mainly thanks to historical strategic partners like Russia and, most importantly, China. The Chinese, for instance, have committed to providing economic and military assistance to North Korea, in addition to being its largest supplier of oil and various consumer goods. To put this into perspective, over the last 2 decades, China has been North Korea's largest trading partner, accounting for 98% of its total imports and exports in 2023. This raises the question, why is China now set to abandon North Korea? Thus, one of the main reasons why the Chinese support North Korea so strongly is the fact that the country serves as a buffer state. In other words, North Korea acts as a barrier that prevents direct contact between the Chinese and American borders through South Korea, where the United States has maintained military bases since the 1950s, with a force exceeding 20,000 troops. As a result, this minimizes border tensions and reduces the likelihood of direct conflict with the United States. From this perspective, keeping North Korea economically dependent is highly advantageous for China, which in return has a buffer zone that prevents the movement of weapons and military forces close to its territory. However, supporting North Korea has become increasingly costly for the Chinese government, which has spent decades striving to position China as a global leader. To achieve this, the nation has had to align its foreign policy with pragmatism and political stability in order to project responsible leadership on the international stage. Given that Beijing has been actively engaged in international organizations that promote human rights, world peace, and free trade, such as the UN, WTO, and G20, it is often assumed leadership roles within these entities, even financing various initiatives, such as UN peacekeeping missions. And as China competes with the United States in various fields, its strategy to surpass the Americans in economy, diplomacy, and technology is based on a long-term approach. To achieve this, China tirelessly invests in other nations to create a global sphere of influence focused on both trade and mutual cooperation with various countries around the world, offering advantageous loans to its partners or directly investing in infrastructure. As a result, China has become a crucial economic partner for many countries across the globe, challenging the economic hegemony of the United States, whether through the Belt and Road Initiative or the BRICS. Consequently, it can be said that China's strategy prioritizes stability and power projection without resorting to open confrontation with the Americans and their allies. Still, this approach is entirely different from that of North Korea, which, despite sharing China's rivalry with the United States, adopts a distinctly more aggressive and isolated stance. The nation has made numerous threats against both South Korea and Japan, whether through military exercises, ballistic missile tests, or the development of nuclear weapons. Given this, the United States has viewed North Korea's actions as a direct threat to its hegemony and global peace. As a result, the country coordinated a trilateral alliance with Japan and South Korea announced in August 2023, aimed at developing regional security against both China and North Korea. Thus, for the Chinese, North Korea's aggressiveness has a negative effect from a geopolitical perspective, as Beijing maintains strategic interests in the Pacific, particularly in the South China Sea, through which up to 1/3 of global maritime transport passes every year. Without a doubt, the heightened attention of US military forces on North Korea undermines China's ambitions in the region and intensifies its military rivalry with the United States, the European Union, and international forums such as the UN, where China is pressured to take action against the North Korean regime regarding human rights violations and nuclear threats. Then abandoning North Korea would serve as a strategy for China to align itself with international norms and boost its image as a global mediator, particularly in its ambition to lead the global south. Additionally, it could redirect resources toward internal matters and more strategic alliances on the international stage, reducing tensions with the US and its allies. It is also worth mentioning that China has been losing influence over North Korea as Russia and North Korea grow closer, a situation that appears to unsettle China, as the Russians openly support North Korea's nuclear status and provide direct military and economic assistance. This issue directly contrasts with China's vision of a peaceful and controllable buffer state, as opposed to the presence of an unpredictable and nuclear-armed neighbor. This strengthening of ties between Russia and North Korea reduces Pyongyang's dependence on China, diminishing Beijing's ability to moderate its actions, challenging China's strategic interests in the region, and increasing the risk of a potential war on China's border. This comes at a time when there are strong indications that North Korean soldiers are participating in the war in Ukraine, and inter-Korean relations have reached their lowest point in years, with the North officially abandoning the idea of reunification. Therefore, abandoning North Korea would be a strategy for China to align with its commitment to consolidating its role as an economic and diplomatic power, avoiding entanglements with unstable regimes that could destabilize its global relations. Although China opposes Western imperialism and seeks to lead the global South, it still relies on Western countries for its continued economic, technological, and security development in the coming years. By distancing itself from North Korea, China improves its global image and deepens diplomatic relations with the United States and Europe, which remain by far its largest trading partners. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you can, drop a comment below with the next topic you'd like to see on the channel. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks again for your support, and see you in the next video.